Hi guys, it's Dom here from Sounds Fit Magazine and Gimme a Whole Yeah. Just had a wonderful chat with Kamille, who is the NWA Women's Champion ahead of NWA 74 this weekend, and a feud with Taya Valkyrie. We talked about bipolar disorder as well, quite honest and open, frank discussion, so I'm very grateful to Kamille for that as well. Thank you so much to the people involved in NWA for making this time for us, and I hope you guys enjoyed the chat. I really appreciate you checking it out. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it. Obviously, you're in a great position in the NWA now at the top. You are the longest running women's champion in wrestling at the moment. So I want to ask you your definition of success. What does success mean to you as a person and then as a wrestler? And are they different? Like, do you define them as the same thing? Because I guess being a performer and a wrestler, you may have a different approach to what is personal success to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the biggest difference of those successes would be for just my personal success would just to be happy and live a happy life. Like that's really it. Whatever that entails, to be happy day to day, and for the most part, and overall, just happiness of living and feeling like I have a purpose. Things like that. And then as a wrestler, I feel like the success is also being happy because it's a very hard job. And in order to, do it for a long time, you need to be happy. But it's also about helping, like, what can you do for the company? I feel like that's a big, success. Like when you have a match, are you drawing people to come watch that match? Are you drawing people towards the company so maybe they can discover other wrestlers they like, or discover the company as a whole? Like they might know you, but not know the company you work for. So I feel like that's a big success if my name can help the company grow.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned happiness there as well. People have different definitions of success and different definitions of happiness. How do you define happiness? Would you say you're a happy person, Kamille, in general?
It's very I've been open about this before. So I diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So I'm on medication and stuff like that, and a lot of the medicine can make me very tired, and so I'm a very tired person. But for the most part, I would say I have lived a very fulfilled life, and just being able to, have different experiences. And also when I sit back and I kind of appreciate everything that I have going for me. Like I don't have to wake up every morning and go to a job that I hate to work for a very minimal amount of money, which so many people have to do. And so like, I just have to, whenever things get really hard, really think about that. And although it might not just turn the switch right away, you know what I mean? It does help put things in perspective and realize like I am really living a great life.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that as well. I mean, it's interesting. You obviously you mentioned you've talked about your bipolar before. I work with a lot of people with different mental health conditions and differences, disabilities, and things like that. And they might look at you, and obviously you're on the screen, you're on TV, you're on YouTube. UK fans can see you on Fite and things like that, and they might go, oh well, I'm never going to reach where Kamille is because I've got this difference, this disability, this challenge that I'm kind of dealing with. What will be your message to anybody that feels like that? And have you ever felt like that before? And how did you overcome that?
I would just say you just have to keep going, and like the days that you have really hard days, weeks, months, because you never know how long an episode will last. But you just have to realize that there will be good times, and then when you're within those good times, you kind of forget about the bad times anyway. You know what I'm saying? And so it all ends up worth it. And just to keep never move backwards. Like I think I think people say always move forward and like keep moving, but sometimes I do think it's okay just to be still. Because things can be overwhelming sometimes, and sometimes you just need to be still. And like I said too, try your hardest to think about the things that you're appreciative for, your family. If you have family, some people don't have a support system like family, but just to find any little thing that you're happy for. And then also, like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Like I have, you know what I'm saying? And I have these issues as well, and I'm sitting here and I'm making the most of it. Do I struggle? I mean, I have a huge pay-per-view match coming up, and I struggle with anxiety like 2 weeks leading up to it. You know what I mean? And it's something that you just have to figure out. Like how I deal with it might be different than how someone else deals with it, but whatever works for you, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that, pay-per-view match coming up in a little while. But you mentioned that anxiety there. And it's interesting because, again, you are still going out there. You do still do this. And I know you have your medication, you have things that support you. But what is it when you're anxious and when you're really, really struggling? Is there any sort of coping mechanism might be the wrong term, but what is it that you do? How do you kind of, if you experience that anxiety before a match, before you go out there, before you put yourself out to the world, what are the things that you do to help you kind of get in that zone?
Yeah. So a couple things I do is, and this might sound terrible, but it helps me, is I realize like, hey, in the grand scheme of life as a whole, this doesn't really matter. And like, as far as people are going to watch, and hopefully you make them happy, hopefully you give them some sort of like relief for the day and some entertainment. But you're going to be way harder on yourself than everybody else is watching. And so I think that's hard. Like I've always played sports growing up, so I've always been extremely hard on myself. And so I know like when I watch the match afterwards, I'm going to be like, I didn't like any of that. You know what I mean? But the people watching, they don't even watch it like that. And then also to realize like wrestling, it's such a niche. It's such a niche. And so when I go out in my everyday life, it's not like Joe Schmo at the grocery store most likely didn't see my match the other night. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I don't have to worry in that regard that like, oh, everyone's judging me or everyone's thinking this and that. And then also I'll when I get anxious, I'll actually go back and watch like old matches of mine just to realize like, hey, you're really good at this and you know what you're doing. Yeah. Like it's okay. And like, I'll sit there and I'll be happy and like to hear the fans' reactions and stuff like that. It just gives me a comfort of knowing like, you know what you're doing. You can do this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you again for that reflection. I really, really appreciate it. Like so, I do have some wrestling questions, I do promise, but I think it'd be interesting to ask you as well. When everybody has bad days, and people have bad days, and a lot of the people that I work with, they are really creative. Maybe they're an artist, maybe they're a musician, maybe they want to get into wrestling, but they struggle to pull themselves out of bed in the morning. Sometimes if they're having a bad day, if they're struggling with mood or they're struggling with some symptoms of a condition, things like that. And I wonder, whether it's coffee or whether it's your partner or whatever it is, what is it that pulls you out of bed on those worst days, on the days where you're really struggling? What kind of things do you kind of rely on? Yeah. What kind of things do you rely on? What kind of support systems do you have in place to pull yourself out of bed on those more challenging days?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be frank. There's some days where I don't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And then that's what I mentioned earlier too. Like I think it's okay to be still, but I also kind of put a limit on it. Like I don't want to stay in bed for like 3 days at a time. You know what I mean? I there's a point where it's like, okay, come on, let's do this. And even if it's just going and taking my dog on a walk, like my dog helps a lot. Like I'm the person that uh in the morning, she always comes to my side of the bed because she knows I'm the person that's going to take her out. I'm the person that's going to feed her. And it's not like it's because Tom wouldn't help do that, but it's like, that's my job. And that gets me out of bed. And that like little things like that, it's like, it's almost like a routine thing. It's like, okay, well, I have to take care of my dog. I have to make sure she eats. I have to make sure she does this. So like that helps me a lot.
Yeah.
And then too, lately I've had a really hard relationship with the gym. Like I used to love going to the gym and lately I've kind of hated it, but just telling myself like, hey, it's part of your job. You have to go. Like you have to go. And even if my workout is a crap workout, it's like, at least I made it in there and at least I did something for the day. And so just little things. And and that's the thing too, is when you're struggling with stuff like that, you really do have to appreciate like little victories, even if it's taking a shower for the day, like little things, you can be proud of yourself. And like, sometimes I'll post a picture and like, I don't think that everyone understands my caption or anything, but I put like, I dressed up today, like that's a big deal because it's a big deal for me. So just appreciating all the little victories that you can have.
Yeah. A friend of mine once said, some days all you can do is the dishes. And I quite like that. Yeah. So I have cerebral palsy myself. So I struggle sometimes as well. So that's why I asked those questions. And thank you again for your reflection. On to some wrestling. I know you said in a recent interview that you'd kind of you'd come into your own this past year. And I'm really curious to sort of see, hear from you. What have you learned about yourself since the beginning of your career? Because you've been in NWA for a while. Obviously, you have been other places. You have competed in other organizations. What have you learned about yourself from the beginning of your career up until this point? How have you changed and developed, would you say?
I think I've just learned to be comfortable with my style of wrestling, my style of talking, especially in today's landscape of wrestling. Sometimes I feel like you feel like you have to do 1,000 flips and put these matches that are just a spot fest together. And although that does take a lot of talent and athleticism, like I think that there's room for everybody's style of wrestling, especially in the NWA. We're a little bit more old school. And so I think just getting comfortable with like, hey, this is my style. This is how I put a match together. This is how I wrestle. And some people aren't going to like that, and realizing like that's okay, because you have also a big group over here that really enjoys your work. And so I think just becoming more comfortable with who I am as a performer, as a wrestler, and not being someone that I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of being comfortable in your own skin is what I kind of heard there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay. And I'm also really interested in your character development, because when you started in the NWA, you were this kind of imposing powerhouse, but you weren't speaking, a whole lot at all. And I'm interested, from your point of view, what was that, character development like? And obviously, there's still more to come. There's still more to go. So, how has it been developing the Kamille character in NWA? From that beginning, and obviously becoming world champion, and where you are now. Tell me about that character development and how you've enjoyed kind of that.
Well, it was interesting because when I first came on with the NWA, there was no plans of me wrestling at all. We didn't. The first time with Nick was actually at NWA. Was it 70 at this point? Wow, that's a long time ago. But NWA 70, and I came out with the match with Cody, and he had Brandy by him, and that was going to just be possibly a one-off thing for that match. But the chemistry and the dynamic ended up being something that Billy really was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And so and the no talking thing, that wasn't like a planned thing. It's just because I was like the bodyguard, and or it organically happened that like I wouldn't be talking anyway. And so I will say for like 2 years, because it ended up turning into a thing, and then 2 years of not talking was actually hard, because I can cut a promo and I like talking. And it was hard to see like little comments like, oh, probably because she's not ready to cut a promo yet, blah, blah. I was like, oh, right, yeah. Watch. Like when I start talking, watch, you know what I mean? And then the funniest thing about it too is I started talking, and people were so disappointed that I was Southern. They thought I was going to be like English or Russian, and then I had a Southern accent. People were like, what? That doesn't match how she looks, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry for being Southern. But I think, and that's another thing too, is just getting people used to me and used to how I talk, how I move in the ring, little things like that. Like it just it's more exposure and getting people used to it and like okay with it. And I think it's just been interesting to figure out like, okay, what sorts of promos do I like cutting? Like, for instance, when we do the podiums with NWA, I love cutting a promo in front of a live audience, because you get to play off of them, stuff like that. And then like little backstage things that are like the pre-planned promos, those I don't like as much, but it's just like figuring out, okay, how am I going to talk during those? It's all a big learning curve, and it's been really interesting.
Yeah, it's really exciting to watch your progression and listen to you reflect on it as well, because you've come a long way, you know what I mean? And it's interesting because as an outsider, I would forget, of course, that people would have this vision of what you're going to sound like. And that people, doesn't make, as someone from Yorkshire, where no one understands my accent if I come to the US, right. I kind of get it. But yeah, it boggles my mind that people would be disappointed that you have the Southern accent. Such a strange thing,
It's like when people listen to the radio and they envision this radio person, how they sound, and they finally see a picture and they're like, wait, what?
Yeah. It's
the same. It's like the opposite of that.
Yeah, interesting points, Kamille. And I think I also want to ask you about the pressure. Now, there's two strands to this question, because obviously you are longest reigning women's champion around. Like we did mention that. So there's pressure in that, but also being a part of the NWA. And I'm going to ask you about legacy in a second. But obviously, there's a lot of legacy to NWA, a lot of history there. Do you feel any pressure being in the position you're in, being a part of the organization you're a part of?
I wouldn't say it's because of the organization I'm a part of, because it's one of those things, like with the history and the legacy of the NWA, so many people have paved the way for us, and you have to be really appreciative of that and know your history. But it's like, we're also doing our own thing now. So like, we like to, pay tribute to the past, but also realize that we're still doing our own thing and paving our own way. You know what I mean? And so I don't put pressure on myself in that sense, but I do put pressure on myself just as a champion, because I'm kind of like the figurehead of the company on the women's side, especially, if you will. And so it's like how I carry myself outside of wrestling, how I carry myself inside of wrestling. I have to think about all sorts of things. And then just knowing too, like, my matches, they're always going to be a NWA women's world title match. And that's a big deal. And so it's not something I take lightly. It's something that, I do put a lot of pressure on myself. And I will say, when I first got the title, I didn't know if I would be ready. I had only had, I think, 4 matches with the NWA at that point. And so when I found out, like, okay, I got to take this on, I didn't know if I'd be ready. And luckily in life, I've kind of always done pretty good under pressure. So I think the pressure actually ended up helping me out in the long run. And although I feel every bit of it, I get anxious, I get, a little scared sometimes, I do think that the pressure is good for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. One of the best bits of advice I ever heard, different people have different responses to this, is if you're not nervous, you don't care enough. And do you know what I mean? And I feel that. Do you know what I mean? And some people, maybe there's a less confrontational way to say it, and I haven't figured that out yet, but I always like that. People would like, if you go on stage or you perform, I always like the idea of people like, I'm really nervous, because to me that shows you give a monkeys, you know what I mean? You really 100%. Care about it.
Yeah. And I've heard too, similar thing. Like, you can if you turn your nervousness and think about it, it's like, oh no, I'm just excited. Then you can look at it that way. Then that's like a positive way of looking at it. And so I try to remind myself, like, no, you're just excited, but it doesn't always work. I'm like, no, I'm nervous.
Yeah, you're using that nervousness to take yourself forward, and I totally respect that. 3 or 4 more questions now, then Kamille. Obviously, we did talk about legacy. Now, similar line of questioning to the success question. Do you concern yourself with legacy, being a part of the NWA, being a performer that is, in such a prominent position? Do you think about legacy? Do you think about the legacy you're going to leave, or not at all? Because some people don't concern themselves with that. How do you feel about the sort of term legacy? What's your relationship to it?
No, so I don't think about that at all. And I think part of that is because I know I'm so early in my career. Like, I know I have so much time left and so many other things that I'm going to do. And who knows, what will happen, where I'll end up. And so I don't concern myself with that at all. What I do try to, like I said, I try to just be a good representation for where I am now. And it's surprising to me, because I don't think of myself in a way like, oh, people are watching me and people are like, I might inspire some people. I never think about that. And so when people tell me stuff like that, it's very surreal. Like, I've been in locker rooms with a girl who to me was like, around my age, the same type of experience as me. And she told me like, oh, I watched you and I really looked up to you and all this. And I was just like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I'm just figuring this out just like you know what I mean? And so stuff like that, it's really cool, but it's also very surreal. And I have to like keep that in mind that, people are watching, and that I might inspire a little girl, and that could be my legacy. And so if I look at it anyway, especially with how I handle myself, I think it's definitely a positive thing.
Yeah, that is really interesting, isn't it? If you just inspire one person, that's still a beautiful thing, and obviously you're in a position to inspire many more. we've got to the promo section of the interview. You do obviously have, a couple of days. You have a big title match. Taya Valkyrie, of course, a legend in her own right. You're facing Taya, and then obviously you've also got the looming Burke Invitational for that #1 contender. Again, we talk about pressure. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about going into this match? Such a big stage. Having these sort of challenges ahead of you.
Yes, I'm super excited for my match with Taya, just because I do think she's probably my toughest competitor yet. She's wrestled all over the world. She's been doing this for a long, long time. She knows all sorts of styles. She can do a little bit of everything. So it's not like I have advantage of her, in that regard. And so it's going to be a super interesting matchup. And then when I win that match, I got to be confident, right? The next night, it's like, okay, I'm going to be a little beat up. I'm probably going to be more beat up than whoever's in the gauntlet, because, they're not going to spend as much time in there most likely than my match. And so, and I have no idea, I can't prepare for it because I have no idea who's going to win. So I can see who's in the gauntlet and kind of get an idea like, okay, this is who I think can come out on top. But it's wrestling, anything can happen. So I have no idea. And so I just have to try to, the way I've been looking at it is I have to get through night 1 first. And that's where my focus is first. It's like, I have to win that, and then I'll worry about the rest later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing at a time, one obstacle at a time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously fans here in the UK can watch NWA 74 on Fite. Yeah, like a lot of other people in the world. But what is your message? Because you're very active on social media, and I will ask you about the plugging. Obviously I've loved watching some of your blogs on YouTube and things like that. You do have a lot of followers and supporters, in the UK and around the world. So what is your message to those people that have supported you through your career and will continue to do that, whether they're in the UK or beyond?
Well, kind of side note, we're going to be in the UK in December, and I'll finally be wrestling there for the first time ever. I don't have the name of I've worked for so many promotions, I can't keep up with all of them. Yeah, but keep up. If you follow me on social medias, I'll post it eventually, and you'll see where I'm working in the UK. And we're also doing a signing up in London when we get in. So if you're around the UK area, we will be seeing you. Tom and I, at least, will be seeing you soon. So we're super excited about that. And obviously Tom's from there, so he's excited to get back home and wrestle in front of some fans too. But as far as UK fans, people around the world fans, I just really appreciate the fans that truly want to enjoy wrestling and are not trying to pick everything apart, not trying to be negative, not trying to be trolls. Thank you to the fans that are kind-hearted people and just really want to have an escape and a getaway. And that's what we're here for. We're here for people to have a relief from their hard day's work, you know what I mean? And that's what we really want to do. And so we appreciate everybody that watches for free, that spends money on the product. We know it's hard-earned money. And so just thank you,
Absolutely. Is there anywhere that you're kind of excited when you get over here? Obviously, London, you will be there. It is the capital. But is there anywhere you're excited to visit when you come over in the UK?
We're going to be seaside for one of those nights, which is not going to be nice because it's in December, but at least it'll be pretty to see. We can't actually go out on the beach or anything in the water. I'm excited to go to Greg's again and get a cheese and onion pasty, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's it. Cheese and onion pasty. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that. And then obviously all the chocolate. Doug Williams, actually, every time he comes back over for NWA tapings, he we get him to bring us so much chocolate because it's I don't know if you've ever been over here or had the chocolate over here. Yeah, but it's terrible. Yeah, it's so terrible.
I was never a fan of Hershey's or anything like that when I was over.
So bad.
Yeah.
No. So I'm excited for all the chocolate, and then obviously seeing they came over for the wedding, so we got to see them in May. But spending time with his family, it's going to be great.
In terms of anything else you'd like to plug, anything we've missed, you do obviously have your channels and things like that. Kamille, is there anything you'd like to plug before we finish?
Yeah, so you can keep up with me. Mostly I'm the most active on Instagram, and that's at Kamille Brickhouse. If you want to keep up, I usually put my dates and my whatever I'm working coming up the week of normally is what I do. And so if you want to keep up with what I'm doing, check me out there. Check out the NWA socials as well to see what's going on. Fite TV, we're on Fite TV on Tuesdays, and then the product comes out on Fridays on YouTube for free. But if you get the $50 Fite All Access package, you can watch it on Tuesdays, and that comes with every single pay-per-view for the whole year. So to me, $50 for every pay-per-view we do, you can't really beat. So I would say go ahead and do that, and then make sure you watch NWA 74 this weekend.
Brilliant. Kamille, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yep. Thanks so much.